So my name is Mary Donlin. I was also a graduate of Santa Clara, class of '89, and it is my honor to be here today to speak on behalf of the Burke family. William Burke was my uncle. He enlisted in the Marines in 1968, and in June of '69, just a few short weeks before he was to come home, his life was cut short. The story, as I understand it, was that he was killed in friendly crossfire while training the South Vietnamese. I have to be honest. I Googled how to give a memorial speech. I've never given one before. I wanted to ensure that I spoke intelligently, that I hit all the key points, and most importantly, that I represented my uncle with the honor that he deserves here today. In doing my research, all the tips suggested that I keep it conversational, that I share personal memories that not only emphasize my uncle's qualities, but that also allow those of you listening here today who did not know my uncle to be able to relate our memories to your own. So I hope that if I do this well enough, that by the end of this speech, you'll understand what his loss meant to our family, and maybe you'll miss him just as much as we do. I should also know that the tips that I read through said to not be afraid to show emotion. Well, for those of you that know me, you know I'm a wear your heart on your sleeve kind of person. That being said, I did plan ahead. I chose waterproof mascara for today. So I do have that going. However, pushing 50, for children here, that's years old that I'm referring to. There's no magic beauty trick for the bags that may appear under my eyes. You're gonna all just bear with me on that one, so my apologies. In talking with my family, no matter which sibling of Bill's that I spoke to, there were two qualities about Bill that stood out above the rest: protector, and the undying love that he had for his family. Bill protected his siblings under any circumstance, whether it be taking the blame for something so they didn't get into trouble, or confronting a disgruntled neighbor who didn't like his little brother and sister playing ball in the backyard because the ball hit the fence one too many times, or asking a close friend to watch over his baby sister when he went off to war. He also taught them how to wrestle and to put someone in a headlock, just in case they needed to take matters into their own hands. He wanted them safe, and he would have done anything to ensure their safety. Family. Bill loved his family very much. Besides taking on the role of protector, he was a big brother who was also a best friend. And in turn, he was Barbara, Betty, and Barry's biggest hero. When you walked into my grandparents' home, the first thing that you saw was this big shelf. It's mounted high up on the wall, dead center, middle of the room. You couldn't miss it. On this shelf was Bill's senior picture, his Marine Corps photo, the boxed burial flag from his service, along with all of his medals and some other memorabilia. This display was a constant reminder of his sacrifice, as well as his spiritual presence within our family. Growing up, our family functions were a pretty big deal. It didn't matter what the holiday or special event was that we were celebrating. The house was always overflowing. There was more food than one could ever eat, and chaos for days. You could always find someone flipping through the photo albums my grandmother kept in the living room. And inevitably, Bill's name would come up, and memories would be shared. So although my Uncle Bill passed away a year before I was born, our family kept his spirit very much alive. And not once did it ever feel like we didn't know him. The importance of family was something that resonated very strongly within the Burke household. My grandmother, who we affectionately referred to as Mom Burke, was a domineering matriarch. She could coordinate any family function under pressure and do it with more love and patience than most are capable of. Yet she did this with a hole in her heart that no parent should ever have to experience. The loss of her son, as with anyone's child, brings with it an indescribable pain, one that never goes away. When our family would get together, I often would catch Mom Burke crying. It was always done very quietly, and most times I doubt she even knew that I noticed. But I do remember I was about 10 or 11. I went to my mom and I asked her, why do I always see Mom Burke crying? And she looked at me and very simply said, she misses her boy. And it was at that moment that I understood for the first time the impact that my Uncle Bill's death had on his parents and his siblings. If you watch the news, I'm sure you've seen footage of then Commander Marine General John Kelly. He speaks about the loss of his son in combat. He, of course, touched on the obvious, that there is nothing worse than the loss of a child, but he also reflected on how those of us who have lost a loved one, whether it be a parent, a grandparent, or a friend, that we think we can somehow imagine what it would be like, and that we can relate to that parent. But we can't. He said it's nothing like that. But he did say that there is pride that goes along with it. Because that son or that daughter didn't have to be doing what they were doing. They wanted to be there. They volunteered. And they were doing what they wanted to do. I chose to share this story because I do hope that this pride that Kelly spoke of is something that might have also brought my grandparents, my mom, my aunt, and my uncle some level of peace. Because their son, their brother, he gave his life for something that he believed in. And that sacrifice was worth it to him. Principal Guzman, John Higgins, all the faculty and staff, and everyone that donated for these beautiful benches to be placed here today. On behalf of the Burke family, I want to thank you. It warms our hearts truly to know that Bill's alma mater values his service and sacrifice and is contributing to keeping his memory alive. I am confident that he, as well as my grandparents, are looking down here today with great respect. So thank you. In closing, to those who have courageously given their lives, especially William Davidson Burke and Stephen P. Hansen, and to those who bravely fight today, I say thank you. And I'd like to ask that all of us, as we walk through life, sometimes stumbling, that we not forget the sacrifice our soldiers make for us every single day. And in choosing not to forget, that we return the favor by thinking before we act, and that the choices we make are made with kindness, compassion, love. If we can do that, the sacrifices made by our loved ones will not have been made in vain. Thank you.